Chapter 1. The Unlikely Encounter. In the far reaches of the galaxy, on a planet known to its people as Verkos, the stars seemed distant not only in space but in the hearts of its inhabitants. The Ver, a race of beings with translucent skin that shimmered with the light of their bioluminescence, had long believed in one universal truth. Love was a bond best confined to their own kind. For centuries, their world had been built upon this premise, and their laws, philosophies, and even their art reflected this belief in the most profound ways. They had their families, their social structures, their cultural practices all designed around the certainty that love, as a deeply emotional and biologically intertwined experience, could never transcend the boundaries of their species. And, to them, it seemed obvious. Love between species was not only impractical, but impossible. For the Ver, emotions were a deeply regulated and integral part of life. Their capacity to love was extraordinary, and their ability to connect with one another was unmatched. Their society placed the greatest emphasis on familial bonds, emotional intelligence, and deep, unspoken connections that traversed the very fibers of their beings. The idea of love crossing the species barrier was seen as nothing short of absurd. How could something as intangible as love withstand the vast differences that defined each species, their biology, their cultures, their entire way of life? It was simply beyond reason, beyond what their ancient knowledge could even begin to grasp. But there, in the quiet depths of their understanding, something stirred. Deep within the subterranean cities of the Ver, in the expansive libraries that housed their ancient texts, there existed a record, a whisper among scholars, a hypothesis that had long been buried and dismissed. It was not an official stance, nor something anyone openly spoke of, but it was there, quietly existing like a ghost in their history. The hypothesis posited that perhaps, just perhaps, love was not a concept tied only to one's own species, but a universal force, something capable of binding all beings together. This theory had been dismissed long ago by the leaders of the Ver, but it remained a piece of hidden knowledge, a fragment of a question that would never see the light of day. On one of the trade routes that cut through the galaxy, far beyond the star systems the Ver frequented, a ship drifted. It was not the grand, glittering cruiser of royalty nor the sleek transport of a trading company. No, this was a vessel so modest, so plain, it was almost invisible against the vast backdrop of space. Yet it held within it something that no one could have expected, a human, and not just any human, but one whose very existence would challenge everything the Ver had ever known. His name was Marcus Cole, and he had no idea that he was about to enter a world where love, for the first time in galactic history, would be tested in ways no one had ever imagined. Marcus had never been the type to dwell on the big questions. He wasn't a scientist or a philosopher. He was just a pilot, a man who had spent most of his life among the stars, ferrying cargo between planets, traveling from one barren rock to the next, and witnessing the occasional dispute between galactic factions. The galaxy was a big place, and Marcus was merely one of its many insignificant travelers. He had grown up on Earth, a place where human society was as diverse as it was chaotic, a planet that was trying its best to find its place among the stars. But for all the noise and bustle of Earth, for all its wars, political dramas, and shifting alliances, Marcus had learned to keep his head down and focus on the task at hand. Fly the ship, deliver the cargo, and get paid. It was simple. It was safe. But Marcus's simple life was about to be thrown into turmoil. One fateful day, while docked at a lesser-known space station on the edge of a sector, he received an unexpected job offer, one that would send him spiraling into a world that he could never have predicted. The message had come through the secure channels, a strange transmission encrypted in a code he didn't recognize. At first, Marcus thought it was a glitch or spam, a rogue transmission from an overzealous techie trying to find a way into the system. But as he read the message, the words took on a strange, compelling tone. The message was clear. Your skills are needed. Verkos seeks human presence. A diplomatic mission. Immediate departure required. Marcus chuckled to himself. A diplomatic mission? Him? The only thing he knew about diplomacy was how to smile and nod at customs officials when he got caught with too many cigarettes or an extra bottle of whiskey. But there was something about the phrasing, something about the urgency that grabbed his attention. He didn't exactly have a full itinerary, and the allure of a mysterious mission that promised high pay was enough to tip him into action. He responded to the message and agreed to take the job, thinking nothing more of it than another gig. The cargo hold was full of supplies, medical equipment, tools, things that had no real significance to him. All he needed to do was drop them off on Verkas, and the job would be done. But as Marcus flew his ship toward the Ver system, the reality of the situation began to sink in. This wasn't just any diplomatic mission. Verkas wasn't just any planet. The moment his ship entered the orbit of the planet, he could feel the weight of something ancient and powerful hanging over him. He had no idea who had requested his presence, but one thing was certain. There was something more at play than just a simple cargo delivery. The Verkas spaceport was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. It was a sprawling complex, a magnificent series of platforms and docking bays that stretched into the clouds, surrounded by an energy shield that pulsed with an ethereal glow. The architecture of the station was organic, flowing, like something out of a dream. Curved edges, bioluminescent walls, and structures that seemed to hum with life. It was clear from the moment he arrived that this was not a planet governed by the usual rules of commerce. This was a place of refinement, of ancient customs, and, judging by the guarded look the customs officers gave him when he disembarked, a place that viewed outsiders with great suspicion. Marcus was escorted to a holding area, where he was instructed to wait. The chamber was silent except for the distant hum of energy flowing through the station. He had little to do but examine his surroundings, noting how starkly different this place felt from the worlds he had visited. It wasn't just the aesthetic, though the people here seemed otherworldly, almost too calm, too serene. Their eyes glowed faintly, a soft light that spoke of years of evolution and a quiet power that set them apart from the hustle of human society. Hours passed, and Marcus began to wonder if this job was another waste of time, another empty promise leading nowhere. But just as his patience began to wear thin, the door to the chamber opened, and a figure stepped in. A Ver, tall, graceful, with shimmering skin that reflected the ambient light in every direction. She moved with a calm that was unnerving, as if each step was a part of an intricate dance that only she knew the choreography to. Her eyes locked with Marcus's, and for the first time since he had arrived, he felt a stir of something in his chest, something unfamiliar. She introduced herself simply. "I am Arlia." Her voice was soft, melodic, but there was a commanding quality to it that instantly captured Marcus's attention. There was no need for pleasantries, no formal introductions. Arlia was no diplomat. She was something much more, something he couldn't quite place. She studied him for a moment, and he could feel the weight of her gaze, like she was peering into the very core of his being, evaluating not just his body but his thoughts, his past. "I have a task for you," she said, her tone serious now. "And I need you to understand something before we proceed. What you've been called here to do is not simple. It is not a task that can be explained away in words. It requires trust and, above all, understanding. The galaxy is not as it seems, and the truth of our species, of all species, will be tested in the coming days. The impossible is about to become reality." Marcus's brow furrowed in confusion, but he said nothing. He had learned long ago to listen first and ask questions later. And this, whatever this was, had taken an unexpected turn. Arlia continued, her words both cryptic and intriguing. "The idea that love cannot exist between our kinds has been a universal truth," she said, her eyes locking with his again. "But you, human, are here to prove that wrong. And for that, you must first learn why it has been impossible. And then, you must make it possible." Marcus stood frozen as Arlia's words sank in. His mind raced, struggling to make sense of the strange, unexpected twist in his mission. He had come here expecting a simple diplomatic errand, an easy drop-off, a few formalities, maybe a signature or two, and instead, he was now being asked to challenge the very fabric of an entire galaxy's belief system. "The impossible," she said. "Love between species? Impossible?" The words seemed absurd, even as they hung in the air between them like a weight that neither of them could ignore. Arlia, standing tall and unflinching, seemed to sense the confusion in his eyes, yet there was no trace of pity or impatience. She regarded him with quiet understanding, as though her expectations of his reaction were already long formed. Her gaze lingered for a moment before she spoke again, her voice soft, yet carrying an undeniable urgency. Do you understand what that means, Marcus? This is not just about you and me. It's about something far larger, something that has been buried for millennia. The galaxy has maintained its separation, kept its species apart under the premise that the very essence of love is unique to each race, that it cannot span the gap between different species, different worlds, different forms of life. But that is a lie. It has always been a lie. Marcus found himself caught between disbelief and curiosity. Everything he had known about the galaxy had been defined by these boundaries. Humans and aliens rarely mixed beyond politics, trade, or warfare. Love, as a concept, was rarely discussed between different species. It was taboo, a subject that no one dared to entertain for fear of the consequences, for fear that the natural order of things might collapse under the weight of such an impossible idea. It was easier to pretend that love was an exclusive feeling, something that bound only the people of one's own species. Why me? He asked, his voice still uncertain. Why do you think I can do this? I'm just a pilot, Arlia. I'm just a human. I don't even understand what's going on here, much less how I can change the rules of the universe. I've flown from one planet to the next, dropped cargo, met a few people here and there, and that's all I've ever done. I'm not some hero or some champion. I'm just trying to get by. Arlia studied him quietly, as though gauging the depth of his words, the vulnerability in his voice. There was something almost imperceptible in the way her expression softened. A flicker of empathy? Of understanding? She seemed to recognize the limitations of his view, but also the potential hidden within it. You don't see it yet, she said, taking a step forward, her luminous skin glowing softly in the low light of the docking bay. But you have been chosen because of who you are, not because of your skill, not because of your knowledge. You are here because you are untainted by the prejudice that has plagued our galaxy for so long. You are capable of seeing the truth we have all missed. You are the one who can show the galaxy that love is not limited by race, by species, by form, or biology. Love is a force of nature, stronger than anything we have ever known. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. There was something compelling about her presence, something beyond just her beauty or her grace. It was her conviction, the sheer force of it, that made it impossible for him to dismiss her. Something about her belief rang true, even if he couldn't yet understand how or why. Tell me what you need me to do, he said, his voice quieter now, resigned, but with a flicker of curiosity lighting the path ahead. Arlia's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. I need you to help me break the barriers. You are not the only human to come to this planet, but you are the first to prove that this galaxy is not as divided as it believes. You are the first to understand the true nature of what we're dealing with. I need you to help me change the future, Marcus. Chapter 2. Unlikely Beginnings. The days that followed were a blur of strange revelations and impossible tasks. Marcus had barely enough time to digest the gravity of Arlia's words before he was thrust into a world he hadn't even known existed. The Veracos planet was teeming with advanced technology, ancient artifacts, and deeply rooted traditions that spanned centuries. Arlia, ever patient, showed him the intricacies of her culture, the laws and customs that governed their society. But it was not the structures of Veracos that intrigued Marcus most, it was the ideology that ran through every fiber of their civilization. He learned that the Ver, unlike humans, experienced emotions differently. Their minds were interconnected in a way that humans could never quite comprehend, an intricate web of thought and feeling that bound them together in ways beyond simple empathy. The Ver believed that their ability to love was a sacred bond between individuals of the same species, a deeply rooted connection that transcended physical and emotional boundaries. It was a union that could not, and should not, be shared with others. But as Marcus spent more time with Arlia, as she guided him through the rituals and teachings of her people, he began to notice the cracks in their society, the flaws that they had spent centuries trying to ignore. The truth was undeniable. Their perception of love, their ability to connect, was narrow and rigid. It was as though the Ver had created their own boundaries, refusing to look beyond their own kind. And Marcus, human, flawed, and unknowingly powerful, was being asked to show them that love was far more expansive than they could ever imagine. In the midst of these lessons, Marcus also began to notice something else, the the growing tension between the two of them. At first, it was subtle, a passing glance, a shared silence in the midst of their discussions. But as the days passed, it became more undeniable. Arlia was unlike anyone he had ever met, a creature of intelligence, beauty, and grace, yet burdened by the very expectations of her people. Marcus found himself drawn to her, not just in the way he might be drawn to a beautiful woman, but in a deeper, more visceral way. There was a connection between them that neither of them had expected, and it terrified Marcus. He tried to brush it off, focusing on his mission, on the goal that Arlia had set for him. But the more he learned about her culture, about her past, about the hardships she had faced as a woman in a society that valued tradition over progress, the more his feelings for her began to grow. And yet, there was a voice in the back of his mind telling him that this was impossible, that love between them was as impossible as the very galaxy's belief in it. He was human. She was Vare. How could they ever overcome such an insurmountable divide? Arlia, too, seemed conflicted. There were moments when Marcus would catch her looking at him, her gaze deep and intense, and he could almost hear the questions she was asking herself. Was this possible? Was love truly something that could transcend the barriers that had kept their species apart for so long? Could she, a Vare, actually feel something for a human? The very thought seemed foreign to her, something she had been taught to reject. And yet, the connection between them was undeniable. She felt it too. In those quiet moments, when no one else was around, it was clear that there was something stirring between them, a force neither of them could name. One evening, as they stood together in a garden of bioluminescent flowers, the silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. The air was cool, the soft hum of the planet's energy fields providing a background to their moment of calm. Marcus turned to her, his voice barely above a whisper. You've spent your whole life believing that what we're feeling could never happen, that it was impossible. But what if it's not? What if love isn't something that's bound by biology or species? What if it's something more? Arlia's gaze shifted, and for the first time, Marcus saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. I've always believed what my people taught me, that love is something sacred, something only for us. She paused, her voice softer now. But what if you're right? What if I've been wrong all along? Marcus reached out, hesitating for a moment, before gently taking her hand. The moment their fingers touched, there was a spark, a recognition of something deep and powerful that neither of them could deny. I don't know how we can change the galaxy's beliefs, Marcus said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. But I know this. If love is possible for us, it can be possible for anyone. In the days that followed, Marcus found himself drawn deeper into the world of Verkos and the enigmatic people that inhabited it. The bustling spaceport was unlike any he had ever seen, filled with alien ships, gleaming technology, and creatures that defied his understanding. It was a place where species from across the galaxy coexisted, trading and communicating in languages Marcus couldn't even begin to comprehend. He had often found himself feeling like a stranger in this vast galaxy, an outsider, even among the humans who occasionally passed through these systems. But here, on Verkos, he felt that sense of alienation intensify. The Vare were a people of incredible intellect and culture, with bioluminescent skin that glowed softly in the night. Their minds were interconnected, their thoughts and emotions shared in a collective harmony that seemed almost unnatural to Marcus. It was a society that had long perfected the art of emotional regulation, with bonds of love, affection, and connection strictly confined to their species. They had built their society on the foundation of unity and understanding. But within that unity lay a dangerous rigidity, a refusal to consider the possibility that their understanding of love could be expanded beyond the boundaries they had drawn for themselves. As Marcus spent more time with Arlia, his fascination with her grew. She was not only physically stunning, with her ethereal glow and graceful movements, but her mind was sharp, her ideas profound. Arlia carried the weight of her people's history on her shoulders, and Marcus could see the burden she bore. Despite her natural poise, there was an undercurrent of sorrow beneath her calm exterior, a sadness that spoke of the limitations her society had placed upon her, and the boundaries she had been taught to believe in. It was in those moments of quiet conversation that Marcus began to understand the true depth of her struggle. Arlia had been raised to believe that love, as the Vare knew it, was sacred and unique to their species. She had never questioned it, never considered that perhaps the very walls that separated her from other species might be artificial construct social boundaries created by fear, prejudice, and centuries of isolation. In their culture, the idea of love transcending species wasn't just unheard of. It was a betrayal of their core principles. Love between different species was seen as unnatural, something that could destabilize the delicate balance of their society. But with every passing day, as Marcus and Arlia grew closer, something began to shift. The walls between them, walls built by centuries of tradition, started to crumble. And with that crumbling, a new, impossible idea began to take root in Arlia's mind. Could love really exist beyond the confines of their species? Could she, a Vare, truly feel something for a human? And if she did, what would that mean for the rest of the galaxy? The more time they spent together, the more Arlia found herself wrestling with this question. It was something she had never allowed herself to consider, let alone entertain. But there was something about Marcus's humanity, his raw emotions, his vulnerabilities that made her feel a connection so deep, it threatened to unravel everything she had ever believed. She found herself questioning her society, her upbringing, her people's dogma. She had spent her entire life knowing one thing, and now, Marcus had come into her world and turned it upside down. She saw in him not just a human, but a soul capable of the same emotions, the same depth of feeling that she had always believed was unique to the Vare. And that realization terrified her. "Marcus," Arlia said one evening as they walked through a quiet garden, the bioluminescent flowers casting a soft glow on their faces. "What do you think love really is?" The question hung between them like an invisible thread. It was one of those rare moments when the weight of their conversation broke through the barriers they had so carefully constructed. It was no longer about species or race. It was about something deeper, something more universal. "I think love is everything," Marcus replied, his voice soft but filled with an earnestness that made Arlia pause. "It's the thing that makes us connect. It's the reason we feel everything, the good and the bad. It's the reason we care about the people we care about, even when we don't understand them fully. I think love is the one thing that can bridge any divide, no matter how wide." Arlia's heart skipped a beat. She had never heard it put so simply, so purely. Love wasn't a restriction, a limitation. It wasn't something to be contained within boundaries. Love, as Marcus saw it, was freedom, a freedom to connect, to share, to experience. It was an idea so foreign to her that for a moment, she didn't know how to respond. But in her silence, something shifted within her. The walls, those invisible walls she had spent her life building, began to crack, and for the first time, Arlia allowed herself to imagine a world where love wasn't confined by species, by race, by biology. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder if it was possible. If she and Marcus could make it possible. Chapter 3, Breaking Boundaries. As the days passed, Marcus and Arlia continued to spend time together, each conversation, each shared moment, drawing them closer. But the tension between them, the unspoken truth of their growing feelings, could no longer be ignored. Arlia knew it, Marcus knew it, and yet they both struggled to confront the reality of what was happening between them. Love between species was supposed to be impossible because it violated the very foundation of the Vare's beliefs. And yet, here they were, standing on the precipice of something that felt very much like love. But the deeper they ventured into this forbidden territory, the more they realized the stakes. Arlia knew the risk that came with their relationship. The Vare society would never accept them, never tolerate what was happening between them. If their connection became public, if the council learned of it, the consequences would be dire. She would be exiled, cast out, shunned by her own people. Marcus would become a target, a symbol of everything that was wrong with the galaxy, a human who had dared to breach the unspoken laws of the universe. There was no future for them, no place where they could be together without risking everything they had known. It was in this struggle that Arlia found herself torn. She loved her people, loved her culture, loved the history that had shaped her. But she could no longer ignore the truth that Marcus had opened her eyes to, the truth that love was not bound by species, by rules, or by any force other than the heart. She wanted to believe in it, to believe that they could carve out a place for themselves in a universe that had been built on division and prejudice. But with every step forward, the weight of their society's judgment pressed down on her more heavily. One evening, as they sat together on a balcony overlooking the glowing horizon of Verkos, the conversation took a darker turn. Arlia's gaze was distant, lost in the light of the setting twin suns, but Marcus could see the storm brewing behind her eyes. He knew what she was thinking. He could feel the conflict within her, the pull between what she knew and what her heart was telling her. "Marcus," she said, her voice barely audible over the soft hum of the wind. "What if it's not just about us? What if by loving you, I destroy everything that I've been taught to believe in? What if we really are doing something that can never work?" Marcus reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "Maybe it's not about destroying anything," he said, his voice calm but filled with an unshakable certainty. "Maybe it's about building something new, something that isn't confined by the old rules. Love doesn't destroy, it creates. It makes the impossible real. It gives people like us a chance at something greater. And I believe in that. I believe in us." Arlia looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of hesitation, any sign that he didn't fully understand the weight of their situation. But there was none. His gaze was steady, unflinching, filled with something she couldn't deny. It was hope. Hope for a future that no one else believed in, a future where their love could thrive. For the first time, Arlia allowed herself to imagine a world where love could transcend the boundaries of species, a world where they could be free from the constraints of their society. And as their fingers intertwined, she knew that no matter what came next, she would never again be the same. The days that followed were filled with a whirlwind of emotions and decisions that neither Marcus nor Arlia could ignore. Their relationship, once a tentative spark between two seemingly incompatible souls, had now become an undeniable force, pushing them both to their limits and questioning everything they had known. It was no longer just about the simple pleasures of companionship or the fleeting feelings of attraction. It had transcended that. It was about the future of an entire galaxy, the challenge of a belief system so deeply ingrained in every species that even the mere thought of challenging it seemed blasphemous. As they spent more time together, the weight of their forbidden love began to take its toll. They could no longer hide in the shadows, no longer pretend that everything would be fine if they kept their feelings to themselves. The galaxy was too vast, too interconnected for such a secret to remain hidden for long. Every word they spoke, every moment of closeness, was fraught with the tension of what would happen if anyone discovered them. For Arlia, the conflict was particularly deep. She had always believed that the love of her people, the love that existed between the Ver, was sacred, bound by a shared understanding of their connection, their biology, their very essence. To be in love with a human was to break that sacred bond, to betray the very foundation of her species. Her mind was torn between the love she felt for Marcus and the duty she had to her people, to her history. She wanted to be with him, more than anything, but she feared the consequences of that choice. If they were found out, it wouldn't just be a personal betrayal, it would shatter the trust her people had in their laws and beliefs, sending shockwaves through the galaxy. Marcus, on the other hand, struggled with a different kind of fear. He had always been an outsider, a lone wanderer in the galaxy. But now, for the first time in his life, he felt like he was part of something larger, something that defied the boundaries of the species, the cultures, the expectations that had been placed upon him. Yet even he knew that his love for Arlia would not be accepted. They were too different. The galaxy was too divided. Even if they managed to live their lives in secret, they would never be free. And worse, they would never be able to change anything. But it was during one quiet night, as they sat in the garden under the glowing bioluminescence of the flowers, that they came to a silent agreement. Neither of them could deny their feelings any longer. The galaxy's laws, its boundaries, were nothing compared to the truth of their love. They would fight for it. Together. "I can't pretend anymore, Arlia," Marcus said softly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I can't live in a world where we can't be who we are, just because we're different. I know it's going to be hard. I know we're going to face challenges that no one else has had to face. But we have to try. For us." Arlia's gaze softened, the intensity of her internal struggle reflected in the deep pools of her eyes. She had never allowed herself to feel this way, had never allowed herself to believe that love could be so pure, so unyielding. But now, with Marcus beside her, she could see a future where their love wasn't a weakness, but a strength. A future where they could stand together, not as two species trying to bridge a gap, but as two people who had found something worth fighting for. "I've spent my life following the rules, Marcus," Arlia whispered. "Following the traditions of my people. But I don't want to follow them anymore. I want to create something new with you. I want to prove that love isn't just for those who are the same. I want to prove that it can break all boundaries, even the ones that have held the galaxy apart for centuries." For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of their decision hanging between them. But as they looked into each other's eyes, they both knew that they had made their choice. They would no longer hide, no longer cower under the weight of societal expectations. They would fight for what they believed in, for their love, and for the galaxy that needed to see that love could be a force of change. The first step was coming. Chapter 4, Breaking the Chains. It didn't take long for their secret to be discovered. There were eyes watching them, always. As the connection between Marcus and Arlia deepened, it wasn't long before rumors began to spread, whispers in the corridors of power on Verkos, among the ruling councils and the elites who had long controlled the narrative of their people's beliefs. It was inevitable that their love, their defiance, would draw attention. What they hadn't expected, however, was the level of resistance they would face. The Council of Elders, the governing body of the Ver, was swift and decisive in its reaction. Their love was an affront to everything they had built, a challenge to the very core of their identity. To them, Arlia's relationship with Marcus was not just a personal matter, it was a direct threat to the societal order that had governed them for millennia. And so, they acted with the full weight of their authority, summoning Arlia and Marcus to appear before the council. The trial was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. It was not a trial in the sense that humans would understand. There were no lawyers, no defense or prosecution, just an assembly of the galaxy's most powerful beings, sitting in judgment of two individuals who had dared to love across the boundaries of species. The air was thick with tension as Arlia and Marcus stood before the council, their fates hanging in the balance. "You have broken the laws of our people," one of the elders said, his voice cold and unwavering. "You have dishonored our traditions, and for that, you must be punished." The words stung, but Marcus refused to bow. He looked at Arlia, her hand trembling in his, but her gaze steady and strong. This was it. They had known this moment was coming, and they had made their choice. They were ready to face whatever the council decided, but they would not let them break their spirit. "We have done nothing wrong," Marcus said, his voice firm. "Love is not a crime. It's not a betrayal of your people, it's a force of nature. We shouldn't be ashamed of it. We shouldn't hide it." Arlia stood beside him, her voice steady. "If you believe love is what binds your species together, then why can't it bind us all? Why can't we be free to love who we choose? The galaxy has spent centuries dividing us. But Marcus and I, we've found something that unites us." The council was silent for a long moment, the weight of their words hanging heavily in the air. Then, finally, the elder who had spoken earlier stood, his face a mask of stone. "You speak of unity, but you fail to understand that unity cannot come at the cost of our way of life. You are not just asking for acceptance, you are asking for revolution." But it was too late. The seed of change had been planted. Arlia and Marcus had already shown the galaxy something that no one could ignore. The impossible was possible. Love had broken through the boundaries that had once seemed unbreakable. In the days that followed, their story spread across the stars, igniting debates and stirring the hearts of those who had long been silenced by the weight of their species' dogma. What had once been considered impossible was now something that could no longer be denied. As for Arlia and Marcus, they did not wait for permission to love, they simply loved, in defiance of the laws that sought to tear them apart. Their love became a beacon of hope for all who had been told that they could never belong, never be accepted. They had proved that love was not something that could be confined by species, by race, or by tradition. It was a force that transcended all boundaries. And so, together, they began the work of rebuilding a galaxy where love, in all its forms, was no longer impossible.